We live in a world where we're constantly scrolling, constantly looking at things, but how much do we actually see? It's one thing to look, but it's something else entirely to truly observe. Today, we're going to crack open a guide that's almost 200 years old, but its advice on how to really see the world, well, it's shockingly modern.
So let's kick things off with a classic mistake. This quote from 1838 just nails it. A traveler shows up in China, meets one guy who's had a bit too much to drink and one woman with red hair, and bam, he writes in his journal that all men in China are drunkards and all women are red-haired. It's hilarious, right? But it's also a perfect, sharp example of how quickly we can jump to these massive conclusions from one or two little facts.
And that really gets us to the big question here, doesn't it? How do we stop ourselves from becoming that traveler? How can we look at a new place, a different culture, or heck, even our own hometown and see what's actually there instead of just seeing what we expected to find?
Well, the answer, and this might surprise you, doesn't come from some modern mindfulness app or a data analyst. Nope, it comes from a brilliant thinker who was wrestling with this exact same problem almost 2 centuries ago.
Everybody, meet Harriet Martineau. Back in 1838, she wrote a book called How to Observe, which was basically a workout plan for your brain. Her goal was to give people, especially travelers, the tools to avoid making these lazy, biased judgments, and instead learn how to do a deep, meaningful kind of observation. So let's see what she had to say.
So Martineau argued that before you even start looking around, you've got to get your mind right. You need what she called an observer's toolkit. And this has nothing to do with what you pack in your suitcase, it's all about what you pack in your head. Okay, so the first tool in the kit is having principles. Martineau sets this up as the total opposite of prejudice. Prejudice is what our traveler in China did, right? He just grabbed a couple of random facts and shoehorned them into a crazy generalization. Principles, though, they're different. They're a framework, a set of big ideas about people and society that helps you organize what you're seeing in a much smarter, more structured way. Her second tool is just as important. Moral sympathy. And this quote, wow, it just gets right to it. What she means is that we have to remember that underneath all the different clothes and customs, the basic human stuff, love, grief, joy, struggle, it's universal. Without that empathy, you're not really seeing other people, you're just looking at a funhouse mirror reflection.
Here's a perfect example of why this matters. If you just look at the cold hard fact, a leader executes 13 rebels, it's so easy to just slap on the label brutal dictator. But if you approach it with sympathy, you start to see the agonizing context. Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution, was trying to hold a brand new nation together. He had to make this impossible choice to stop a revolt that could have destroyed everything. And get this, one of the men he executed was his own nephew. Sympathy lets you see the tragedy and the weight of that choice, not just the action.
Okay, so you've got your principles and your sympathy packed in your mental toolkit. Now what? How do you actually go out and observe the world? Well, this brings us to Martineau's core method, her golden rule.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of her idea. Look at things first. Then use what people say about those things as extra commentary, not as the main event. It's such a simple idea, but it completely flips your perspective. It's like the ultimate show me, don't just tell me rule for understanding a society. But what on earth does she mean by things and discourse?
So things are the real, tangible evidence of what a society values. They're the stuff you can see and touch, the buildings, the laws, the art, the institutions. A cemetery, for example, tells you a ton about how a culture thinks about life and death. A schoolhouse shows you what it thinks about its future. A prison, well, that shows you how it deals with its own people. Things don't have an agenda. They just show you what a society actually does.
Discourse, on the other hand, is everything people say, what they tell you, what's in the news, what politicians are saying in speeches. Now, this stuff is super important for understanding the things, but it can also be biased or aspirational or sometimes just flat out wrong. So you start with the hard evidence of the prison, and then you listen to what everyone says about their justice system. See the difference?
Okay, so we know we need to look for things, but where do we even start looking? The world's a big place. Luckily, Martineau gave us a kind of field guide, pointing us to the key areas that really show you what a society is all about.
And here are some of the big ones on her list. She said you need to look at a society's religion, what it really means by freedom, the status of its women, how it treats people who break the rules, and the relationship between the rich and the poor. I mean, look at that list. It feels like it could have been written yesterday.
Let's make this even more real. For each category, there are specific things to look for. Go to a cemetery.
What do the tombstones say about the people buried there? What values are being celebrated? Look at the police. Is it a community force, or does it feel more like an occupying army? And for the status of women, she had a brilliant one. What jobs are actually open to them? Is there only one path, marriage, or are there many? Each of these things tells a whole story.
So, the big question. How do we take all this brilliant 19th century advice and actually use it in our incredibly loud, messy 21st century lives? Let's quickly recap the main ideas.
All right, let's boil it all down. First, don't just go out there collecting random facts. Have a framework, have principles. Second, lead with empathy. Always trying to understand the context behind what you're seeing. Third, and this is the game changer, focus on the things, the hard evidence of what a society does. And finally, use what people say to add color and commentary to that evidence, but don't mistake it for the evidence itself.
What's just so cool about this is that her advice from way back in 1838 is basically a masterclass in all the skills we talk about wanting today. Critical thinking, empathy, real mindfulness. This isn't just a guide for traveling to faraway lands. It's a toolkit for anyone who wants to understand the world and the people in it just a little bit better.
And that brings us to a final thought, a question for you. If you start to look at the things right where you live, the public parks, the architecture, the songs at the top of the charts, the design of a supermarket, what story are they telling? What are they revealing about us right now that all the noise and chatter of daily discourse might be drowning out? That's the challenge Harriet Martineau left for us, to stop just looking and to finally start seeing.